I've lived in this house for almost 2 years now. It's a tall, narrow Victorian built in 1903, tucked away in a wooded pocket of rural Pennsylvania. The kind of house with creaking floorboards, plaster walls, and narrow staircases that seem better suited to shadows than people. The locals call it the Wicker House, supposedly after the family who built it, though I've never been able to find any record of a Wicker family anywhere in the county's history. What I have found are plenty of old stories, quiet whispers from neighbors, a few faded newspaper clippings, some rumors that it used to be a funeral home. Nothing solid, just enough to keep the air around this place thick. Tonight, the air felt thicker than ever. A rainstorm had rolled in around dinner time, and by 9 o'clock, the entire world beyond my windows was dark and thrashing with wind and water. The trees out front swayed like they were trying to uproot themselves. Thunder rumbled low and deep, shaking the glass panes in their rotting frames. I'd been reading in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, when I first heard it. Something light, but distinct, moving upstairs. I froze, listening. A soft footfall. Then another. I live alone. I waited, trying to convince myself it was just the storm. This house makes noise when it rains, but this wasn't the usual groan of the beams or the squeak of shifting glass. This was pacing, slow, deliberate. Step, step, step. I stood and turned off the record player. The room went silent, but for the ticking of the grandfather clock and the rain slamming the windows. The pacing stopped the second the music did. I stared at the ceiling. The sound had come from the upstairs hall, right above where I stood. I told myself not to overreact. This house is old, really old. But some part of me knew this wasn't the house. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and started toward the stairs. Each step I climbed felt heavier than the last. The wood creaked beneath my feet in a way that made me feel exposed, like the house was warning me. At the top of the staircase, the hallway stretched out in front of me, dim and narrow. The wallpaper was faded green, curling at the seams. A draft came from somewhere, cold and sharp, like it had teeth. I clicked on the flashlight and swept the beam across the hallway. 3 doors, all closed. Master bedroom on the left, guest room straight ahead, storage room on the right. I listened. The rain hammered the roof above, wind howling through the eaves. But beneath that, I swear I could hear breathing, shallow, labored, almost wet. I started with the master bedroom, empty. Guest room, nothing. Then the storage room. This door stuck when you tried to open it. I had to give it a little shove with my shoulder. It popped open with a sigh like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. I swept the flashlight around. Boxes, old trunks, dust in the beam, nothing out of place. But the smell hit me then, like damp earth and old iron, a deep cellar smell, but colder, more sour. The kind of smell that makes the hairs on your neck stand up for no reason your mind can explain. I backed out, slowly. The air felt wrong, like the hallway was pressing in. I didn't see anything, but I felt it, right there at the end of the hall, just beyond the flashlight's reach. A presence, heavy, watching. I locked the storage room and went back downstairs, telling myself I was just tired, that the storm had me on edge. I turned the lights up, relit the fire. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. But this time they were coming down the stairs. I stared at the staircase. Step, step. The old wood creaked under the weight of something invisible, but moving, deliberately, slowly, like it knew I was watching. Step. I should have run, but I didn't. I was rooted, paralyzed. Then it stopped, Halfway down the stairs, the air grew cold, colder than outside. I could see my breath. The flames in the fireplace flickered, then dimmed, then returned. Nothing came into view, but I knew it was still there. I whispered, "What do you want?" before I could stop myself. No reply, just silence. And then a sudden loud crash from upstairs, like a heavy trunk being overturned. I ran back up against all good judgment and found the storage room door wide open. The light flickered in the hallway. Inside, one of the large boxes had been tipped over, contents spilled across the floor. Old books, a child's toy, a broken frame, and a small wooden rocking chair, swaying back and forth, back and forth. No wind, no reason. I shut the door and backed away slowly, locked it again. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat by the fire, flashlight in hand, listening to the wind, the rain, and the occasional creak of that upstairs floor. It never came back down the stairs, but it never stopped walking. I always liked old houses. That's what got me into real estate in the first place. The charm, the craftsmanship, the feeling that each plank and brick had soaked up stories over the decades. But this one felt different. The house sat just outside Fredericksburg, Texas, an 1850s limestone farmhouse with a wraparound porch, the kind you'd see in oil paintings or on postcards. When I pulled up that afternoon, it was just after 5. The sun was low and gold, slanting through the oak trees. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, I had that crawling sense in the back of my neck, the one that tells you someone's watching, even when you're alone. But I shook it off. I'd been in a slump for months, and this house was my shot at something special. Historic homes don't come along often, and this one had been in the same family since before the Civil War. The owner had passed, a widow who'd lived here alone since the 70s. No kids, no one to inherit it. The estate hired me to sell it. I stepped inside and breathed in that old house smell, dry wood, dust, maybe a little mildew, the kind of scent that settles into your clothes. The place was empty of furniture except for a few covered items and an upright piano in the parlor. Everything creaked, from the floorboards to the hinges on the windows. I was up in the second floor bedroom, measuring it for the listing photos. I had just jotted down the dimensions when I heard it. Footsteps, deliberate, slow, on the hardwood downstairs. I froze, listened. A pause. Then another creak, followed by the sound of what might have been a heel scraping against the old boards. I held my breath, heart thudding. "Hello?" I called down the staircase. My voice echoed back, hollow and unreturned. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe a buyer got the wrong date and let themselves in. The front door wasn't locked yet. Maybe someone from the estate had shown up early. Maybe a squatter. I started down the stairs, trying to keep calm, rehearsing what I'd say. But each step made the unease thicken in my chest. When I reached the first floor, it was empty. The front door was still closed. The deadbolt was untouched. I looked around the foyer, the parlor, the kitchen and back. Nothing. I stepped into the dining room, thinking I might find someone by the back door or in the shadows, but it was just me and the sound of the old house settling. I even called out again, just in case. "Realtor here, open house is this weekend. If you're here early, I can give you a quick look around." Silence. I waited a moment, then walked back toward the foyer. That's when I noticed the piano. The lid was open. I was certain, absolutely certain, that it had been closed when I came in. I remember noticing it specifically, thinking it gave the place a certain charm, a rustic elegance. I hadn't touched it. Now, the ivory keys were bare, exposed, and something about the way the lid had been lifted, just slightly off-center, crooked like someone had done it in a hurry, made my skin crawl. Then, a single note rang out, a low F vibrating in the stillness. I jumped, heart slamming against my ribs. The key sank slowly as though pressed by an invisible hand and then lifted back into place with a soft click. I backed away, eyes scanning the empty room, throat dry. "Who's there?" I demanded. Nothing. Just the creak of wood and the high whine of cicadas outside. I fumbled for my phone. No service. Not even one bar. That's when the air changed. It was sudden, like someone had opened a freezer. A cold draft slid through the room, raising goosebumps on my arms. I turned toward the staircase, ready to get the hell out. And then I saw it, at the top of the stairs. A woman, just a silhouette at first, thin, tall, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned dress. She stood motionless, her face in shadow, one hand resting on the banister. I stared up at her, heart in my throat. "Ma'am," I croaked. "I didn't mean to scare you. I'm the realtor. She didn't move, didn't blink. And then, without a sound, she turned and stepped backward, into the wall. Gone. Just like that. I bolted out the front door, didn't even lock it behind me. I sat in my car with the engine running, staring at the house through the windshield as dusk swallowed it whole. I told myself I imagined it. The house creaked. I got spooked. The piano was probably just my mind playing tricks. But the next morning, when I returned with a contractor, I didn't say a word about what I saw. I let him walk in first, watched him unlock the door with fresh keys. I stayed silent as he moved through the house, muttering about wiring and window frames. And when he called me into the parlor, I hesitated, but I went. He pointed to the piano. There, on the dusty lid, was a handprint. Small, feminine, pressed into the grime like it had been waiting. You ever have something happen to you that don't make sense, no matter how many times you turn it over in your mind? I've been an electrician my whole life, 40 plus years. Nothing fancy, mostly residential work, remodels, rewiring old fuse boxes. I've been in crawl spaces with rats, attics so hot they'd make your eyeballs sweat. You see all kinds of things in old houses, but this one stayed with me. It was the summer of '83 down in Mississippi. I was 28, single, still smoked too much and drank gas station coffee like it was water. I got hired by a contractor to help rewire a big old antebellum mansion outside Natchez. Place had been in the same family since the 1800s, but the last heir had passed, and a developer was turning it into a bed and breakfast. Big white columns out front, wraparound porch, 12-foot ceilings, real Southern Gothic stuff. The house was mostly empty when I started, just me and the occasional plumber or drywall guy, depending on the day. But on Sundays, I usually had the place to myself, quiet, peaceful in that big, echoey way old places can be. That Sunday I'm talking about, I think it was mid-August. I came out to finish running wire through the upstairs hallway before drywall went up. I remember it was hot, real hot. No AC yet, just those old sash windows and a couple of box fans humming in the hall. I parked my truck out back, let myself in through the kitchen like I always did, and started setting up. A couple hours go by. I'm upstairs in the hall, kneeling next to an open junction box, feeding Romex down the wall. I've got the radio playing low, old Stones track, I think, when I hear footsteps on the floorboards below. At first, I figured it might be the contractor stopping by, or maybe the plumber again. But when I stood up and peeked down the staircase, I saw someone I wasn't expecting. It was a woman. She was walking slow, like gliding almost, across the front parlor. Her back was to me, and she was headed toward the hallway that led to what used to be the music room. And the dress she was wearing, I'll never forget that. It was one of those big, bell-shaped numbers, like you'd see in an old movie. Pale blue, with lace at the shoulders. Her hair was pulled up, tucked under a little decorative hat, with a veil hanging off the back. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a daguerreotype. I called out to her, "Ma'am, hello?" She didn't stop, didn't turn, just kept on walking. I started down the stairs, confused but not scared. Not yet. I figured maybe she was with the Historical Society or something. Or maybe a reenactor. Though on a Sunday with no events planned, that seemed odd. I hit the bottom step and called out again, louder. "Ma'am, this is an active job site. You ain't supposed to be in here." Still nothing. She just moved, slow and sure, across the hallway. Her skirts barely seemed to rustle, even as they brushed the edge of the doorframe leading into the old music room. I followed her. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? I reached the threshold not even 5 seconds after she passed through, but when I stepped into the room, she was gone. Now listen, this room wasn't big, maybe 15 feet across. One entrance, no closets, no furniture yet, just bare floorboards, high windows, and dust motes spinning in the sunlight. I even checked the corners, the shadows, behind the few stacked boxes in the corner. Nothing. Nobody. It was dead quiet. I remember that part the most. It was like the whole house was holding its breath. And that's when I got cold. I don't mean just chilly, I mean cold. That kind of deep, marrow, freezing cold that sinks into your bones even though it's 95 degrees outside. My skin prickled, my sweat drying like ice water, and I remember the smell. Lilacs. Real faint. Not like flowers in a vase, more like old perfume. Something floral and powdery, just on the edge of memory. My grandma used to wear something like that when I was a kid. It made the hair on my neck stand straight up. I didn't stick around after that. I backed out of that room slow, like whatever had been in there might still be watching me. I packed up my tools and got the hell out of that house. Didn't even bother turning off the radio. Next day, I showed up like nothing happened. I didn't tell the contractor, didn't tell the other guys. What would I say? Hey, I saw a ghost in a hoop skirt? They'd have laughed me off the site. But the thing is, I know what I saw. She wasn't hazy or floating or any of that movie nonsense. She looked real, solid, just not part of now. Over the next few weeks, I kept working in that house, but I never stayed late again, never came back on a Sunday, and I never saw her again. But sometimes, like when I'm working in another old place and I hear footsteps that don't belong, I think about her, that woman in the blue gown, walking through her house like time forgot her, like the past and present slipped for just a second and I saw something I wasn't supposed to. Hell, maybe that house was hers once. Maybe she died there. Or maybe she's still looking for someone. All I know is she sure as hell wasn't supposed to be there. And I wasn't supposed to see her. But I did. And I've never forgotten it.